This East Palestine train derailment has major question marks surrounding it right now that, quite frankly, need to be answered with full transparency. Citizens of the town and surrounding areas, as well as people across the country, are rightfully concerned about the controlled chemical burning and the air, water, and soil effects, as well as human and animal health. Governor DeWine gave an update on the situation on February 14th, but really, it just painted the canvas even blurrier. On this train, there were 5 railcar tankers that were full of vinyl chlorine. Vinyl chlorine is a very toxic and hazardous material, being directly linked to cancer. We use it to make PVC plastic, packaging, wire coating, and many other materials as well. Alongside vinyl chlorine, there are 4 other additional chemicals, totaling up to 20 rail cars full of toxic hazardous materials. Also, there are no guidelines or regulations stating that Norfolk or any other railroad company has to disclose that there are chemicals on board trains. Over the past couple of days, I've now found 20 different Norfolk Southern companies' train car derailments that have occurred in the past 8 months. 6 in Ohio alone. One of them, on January 27th, was in my hometown of Delaware, Ohio. Building off of this, labor unions of the railroad industry have been frustrated with safety concerns, overworking, and unfair labor practices for at least 3 years now. Back in December, the U.S. government forced the union to continue working without finding an agreement for workers due to the railroad's basic need for transportation and shipping. Right now, labor union workers are getting 0 paid sick days. This is a major push by train unions and employees wanting a minimum 7 paid sick days. Also, in the past 5 years, train employee wages have increased 22%. This basically matches the rate of inflation, which means that they're actually not really making that much more money. In the past 20 years, roughly 50,000 employees have been laid off. The railroad companies have come to the conclusion they can get by with fewer employees by fixing things as they happen, rather than preventative maintenance and small innovative technology. And lack of incorporation and research for industry progressing technology, this all just adds up, and it makes the railroads even more unsafe. And this is another huge initiative for unions, pushing for safer working conditions. These large railroad companies are using publicly sanctioned railroads to make billions and billions of dollars, and not giving back to their employees that allow them to make these billions and billions of dollars. Norfolk Southern, in particular, is owned mainly by institutions. 76.89% is owned by institutions and 23% is the general public. The top 23 institutions own just over 50% in the company, the largest stocks being held by Vanguard, BlackRock, and JP Morgan. More head scratching continues. On February 14th, DeWine and his associates held a press conference, essentially saying how there's nothing more to worry about. There are many moments and answers that just didn't line up and posed even more question marks, like this one. Just watch the body language, facial expressions, and the answers given.
Is the giant column of doomsday looking smoke that went up after the quote unquote controlled release and burn. Are we just supposed to believe that that just disappeared, that went up into the atmosphere and just went away? That had to have come down somewhere. There has to be a blanket of whether it's soot or chemical, whether it was the wind sort of shifted that evening, so it kind of went instead of just to the south east, it kind of started to go straight east and then a little to the north. I mean, this has got to be on the ground somewhere. And if we're talking livestock, if we're talking pets, if we're talking kids out playing, there's no concern more than a mile out, 10 miles out, 20 miles out, 30 miles out. What happened to that smoke, and who can give those answers?
As a reporter is asking the question, DeWine's body language in particular is just dancing, just like his answers. The waterway lady, the supposed doctor, and the soil dude are all giving each other the "this isn't me, you answer."
We were monitoring the area in real time when that went up in the area right outside there, and that quality of air remained good the entire time. We later, the next day, went in, of course, to within that area, the red area and the yellow area. But at the moment when it went up, We are still getting readings. My understanding is they're still getting readings right outside that area that indicated that it was good. But I cannot answer your question. What happens when that goes up?
I see major issues with this. DeWine said that the air remained good the entire time, even during the controlled burn. Why is the area that he spoke about marked red or yellow if the air remained good the entire time? Wouldn't the area just be green? Does this look like good air? When vinyl chlorine is burned, it turns into phosgene gas. Phosgene gas was used in World War I, and it linked to about 85% of the deaths. If the air remained good the entire time, why are there thousands of dead and sick animals being reported? If the air remained good the whole time, why was there and still are reports of a smell lingering in the area? People many miles away were saying that they smelled chemicals in the air and that the air smelled like burnt plastic. If the air remained good and safe for citizens to return, why are there now reports of chlorine burns and rashes showing up on citizens? Also a major question mark, there was a company hired by Norfolk Southern going around the homes, inspecting and looking for things that stand out. And in this contract, it was essentially saying how they or Norfolk Southern could not be held responsible. Drinking water concerns are also being talked about. The Ohio River brings water to more than 5 million citizens, but thankfully, many cities in the area, such as Cincinnati, have notified citizens that they will not be pulling water from the Ohio River. But not everyone is fortunate to do that. The EPA has been testing well water and other independent water sources for residents in the area. This concerns me about down the line, 5-6 years from now, when the topsoil and these chemicals that are on said topsoil start to get absorbed and make their way all the way down to the wells, which then affects the water supply. But this is likely to take years down the line, But organizations don't want to take responsibility of what's happening now. Who's to say that they're going to take responsibility 5 or 6 years from now, when health issues from small ppm exposure will come into play from prolonged exposure adds up after so many years? Who will take responsibility down the line when these citizens' lives are being impacted by these negative health effects, from chemotherapy to their health bills to the stressors on the families themselves? Based on past events, very similar situations in worse circumstances have happened before in America. I read a book freshman year of college. It's called Full Body Burden by Christine Iverson. Chris is telling her story of growing up near a nuclear power plant in Arvada, Colorado. This power plant was named the Rocky Flats. Built in 1951, it was a part of Project Apple from the Department of Energy, a side chain from the Manhattan Project. This project was under the Atomic Energy Act, which made public knowledge absolutely limited and very high security inside and surrounding the area. In fact, they told community members that it was a household chemical manufacturing plant. Early on as a child, Chris recalls people in her community developing immense health concerns, like a young boy in her sister's grade, aged 10 or 11, developed testicular cancer from an external source. Dogs, horses, and other animals in the area were all dying at young ages or suddenly at times. Farmers in the surrounding area reported deformed pigs and chickens that laid eggs that would never hatch. People were asking questions and writing to the State Department to figure out what's going on. Dr. Schnombeck, a biochemist at the University of Colorado, had sampled soil a couple miles away from Rocky Flats. He ended up finding that the plutonium contamination level was 1,500 times higher than normal. This is the highest ever near a residential area, including Nagasaki. The state organizations continued to say Rocky Flats was not connected in any way. The late 1970s rolls around the book, and a little bit of progress is being made. Protesters are in town demanding answers. Chris first hears about the possible truth behind Rocky Flats, but doesn't believe it due to her conditioning of believing that it's a household chemical manufacturing plant. At the end of chapter 4, the FBI has finally gotten involved with Rocky Flats and understand that something bad is going on between those walls. The first trial occurs on June 6, 1989. A judge in Denver issued a search warrant. More than 75 EPA investigators are outside the gates of Rocky Flats. Finally, some type of investigation has started after 30 plus years. In Chapter 5, the EPA investigations are taken to court. At the end of the investigation, Settlements are to be paid out, but prosecutor Mike Norton does not sign the indictments. Not a single Rockwell or DOE official is indicted, even with them violating 400 plus environmental violations. The judge orders the court records to remain a secret, and an agreement allows for Rockwell to continue future contracts with the government. The jury is furious. They can't believe that things will go on with no prosecution. Judge Feinsilver asks the jury to keep the truth silent, but the jurors refuse, and they go under the nickname Rocky Flats 23. In Chapter 6, one day after work, years later, Chris is watching ABC Nightline and is informed again about the truth of what is happening at Rocky Flats. She finds out about the leakage of hazardous materials all over Rocky Flats, in the air vents, walls, ceilings, everything, including contaminated water draining into nearby water supplies. And it also mentions the FBI investigation and the jury leaking classified information. Chris finally realizes how Rocky Flats and the government hid and lied about everything for years in her own community. Following this, there's another lawsuit that comes about after the entire nation finds out about Rocky Flats from Nightline. Leading the case is Peter Nordberg, a lawyer from Philadelphia. Early on, Peter realizes the secrecy happening and says it feels like a cat and mouse game with the defendants. The DOE, Rockwell, and Dow Chemical want the full story of Rocky Flats to be suppressed and quickly forgotten. On page 301, Rocky Flats is facing a crisis of cleanup. Tons of plutonium was unsafely stored in a proximity to more than 2 million residents. In 1998, the Colorado Cancer Registry released a report stating there was no evidence of health effects directly attributed to the plant in residential areas near Rocky Flats. But later on, soil sampling on the east side of the plant had the highest off-site contamination, which is where Chris grew up. There were water samples that had key radioactive materials in creeks that flowed into local reservoirs for drinking water. In a statement of the DOE put out on page 307, they said, "Incidentally, ingesting these settlements is not expected to be detrimental to one's health." This is showing how carefully they can depict and use certain words so that they can't be fully blamed. In actuality, Chris writes, when a millionth of a gram of plutonium breathed in or ingested can cause cancer. Rocky Flats was in direct alignment with privatized business and government involvement in research. This is just one of the many stories out there like this, and there's possibly another devastating story developing right in East Palestine. Although nuclear waste is far more volatile than vinyl chlorine, both have direct correlations to cancer and harmful effects on the environment. So we have to learn from the past in order to change the future. Majority of the time, fear is a byproduct of ignorance. This video and the rest made are to overcome fear. So instead of fearing, we can rather take action and responsibility and hold everybody accountable. All of this is a bipartisan issue. It affects each and every one of us. Time and time again, there's solid evidence of our inability to responsibly use harmful and toxic chemicals and its products, from plastic waste heavily increasing every year with no recycling, and evidence of microplastics in humans, to pesticides used in agriculture, and then of course nuclear bombs in at least 9 countries across the globe. We have to come together and work to find solutions to issues that are prominent in our society today, especially those that are in our control. As the most intelligent and conscious beings on our planet, we have the responsibility to protect our home and all that we share it with. We have to protect our health, our neighbor's health, and our future's health. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Thank you.